What's cracking? Thanks for tuning in. I'm about to install the winch on the Jeep, which is one of the most anticipated upgrades. I've had this Jeep for 4 years, and a winch has always been in the plans. When I considered buying it, I knew I would put a winch on it. Why have I waited this long? I picked up this winch about 2 years ago when I saw a better than normal sale at Harbor Freight. It's the Badland Apex 12,000 pound with synthetic rope. Since then, I've noticed that same sale comes around about twice a year. So I could have waited, but I didn't know that at the time. After 2 years, why is it not on the Jeep? Primarily, I was planning the air conditioning retrofit job, and knowing that a lot of the front end had to be disassembled to change some of those components, I didn't want to put the winch in and have to take it back out to do that. In retrospect, had I realized I would procrastinate the AC job this long, and how easy it is to put the winch on, a couple of bolts and a couple of wires, really not that big a job, I would have done it when I first got it. Instead, for the last 2 years, I've been dancing around it in my garage. It's been in the back of the Jeep for a little while. Currently, it's in the back of my wife's Jeep. She wants her cargo space back, and she deserves it. I've been anxious to get it on. The AC job is now done, so there are no more excuses. It's time to do it. Forgive the ambient noise. I'm currently vacuum testing the new AC system. One debate I've been having is whether to use this switch that does come with the winch. After doing some research and reading some opinions, I've decided I do want to put it in. The main purpose is I think it's wise to not have the winch charged when it's not in use, which is the majority of the time. Is it slightly annoying to have to pop the hood and flip a switch to use it? A little bit. For how infrequently I expect to use it, yeah, it's not a big deal, and I would rather have this safeguard. So you have to decide where you're going to put this. Ideally, you could put it in the cab where you could access it without having to pop the hood, but I don't have the wire length to do that, so I'm going to go ahead and put it here. I've decided a good spot is right here next to my coolant reservoir. I have drilled 3 holes. I don't think the 4th one is necessary, so I'm not going to worry about that. The other thing is that this hole that comes in this bracket is a great place to feed the wires into the switch. And it has proximity to the battery, where I'm going to have my positive connection and everything else. So this just seems like a pretty good spot. Let's grab the winch out of the wife's Jeep and review what we have for wiring so we can plan our path. My wife is going to be super happy this big box is out of her car. And I will be doubly happy because I will have a super cool winch on my rig, and more importantly, when my wife's happy, I'm happy. One of the hardest parts is going to be trying to remember what is what. I have the instruction manual somewhere in the house. I've come across it on occasion and thought I need to put that back where I know where it is, and of course I haven't done that. This bag is pretty obvious. These are the bolts that hold the winch down. I do remember this bracket. I remember something about relocating the motor or whatever. And these are obviously connections for relocating that. And of course, we've got battery stuff in here. What I'm looking for right now are the long screws that go with this. And they should have been in the box, but they are not there. So what did I foolishly do with them? Found them. They were just down another layer, so that crisis is averted. Here we have the winch body itself. That bracket I shouldn't need for the fair lead, which I've got that already installed. So what I really need, I think, are these wires right here. I pulled up the manual online, which Harbor Freight has made available, and it is not terribly helpful. For instance, nowhere on here does it show the positive line going to the battery, which I would consider a bit of an oversight, as obvious as it may be. Anyway, I'm going to have to pretty much figure this out on my own. Okay, I think I have my wiring figured out here. Fortunately, this line that comes directly off of the winch, or the winch solenoid, is a good 6 feet long. Longer than it looks when it's in the coil. That should reach back to my switch. Then this short line here, it's about 2 feet long, is just the right length to reach from the switch to the battery. So that connects my positive. The one disappointment I have is it does say in the instruction manual that the negative should hook directly to the battery, and this little negative ground line is not nearly long enough to do that. But I think I can ground this out on the body. If not, I will make other arrangements, but I will try it and let you know if that works. This is looking really slick. I like it. Just a couple of notes. This particular EAG front bumper, very tight tolerances for the fit here. So you'll want to be very careful with your hands on the side. They could easily get pinched. So I had to put mine in kind of at an angle, let one hand go, and then adjust it. It's also really tight on the wiring loom back here. I did get that fed through. Now let me see what my final position is for the winch itself to make sure that that's still going to work okay. A complication, especially in these tight tolerances, this nut needs to go into the base of the winch for the bolt to tap into. What I'm going to try to do, at least for these front ones, is take a magnet, slide the nut into that recess where it goes, and then put a bolt in through the bottom, get it started. Once the bolt is in, I can pull the magnet off and the nut will stay. I have the front two bolts started, and therefore the winch is in place. And as I suspected, I did have to move it back towards the cab just a little bit, which does kind of pinch this wire loom. I'm not concerned about it affecting the wiring at all, or the function. I'm mostly worried about how it's going to rub and wear on my grill. So I do have a second grill that I may swap out once I get the Jeep painted. It's all black. It's not the chrome. So I may reevaluate if I decide to put that one on, if I want to cut out one of these fins and just run the wire directly like through the grill. I'm not sure yet. So it works, but it is tight. All right, I'm going to get the back two in, and then we should be able to finish the wiring from there. The switch box is pretty straightforward. It's got a bottom that holds on once you put the screws through, and then these sides that just slide in through a tongue and groove, so you can pick any of the four to pop out. I have decided to use the back one, just like that, and then you just attach your wires. Okay, we are installed. I've got my two cables hooked up, as you can see from the back. It was a little bit tight back here. Yeah, getting it to kind of navigate this corner and go in. These want to be flat, so you may consider wanting to put a bend in the connections up at this end if you're wanting them to go more down. A little bit of a oversight on my part, but I did get them on. My positive is connected right here to the battery, and then of course the loom going down to the unit itself. To make sure that that loom doesn't come loose and get caught in the fan, I zip tied it. You can see barely that green. I had to double it because they're small. So green and red zip tie. Zip tied it to my liquid AC line down there. And finally, I've just connected the ground to right here. There was already a hole there, so I found a screw that fit just about right, but still bites, and I've got that connected. So theoretically, this should be ready to roll. So it's kind of a initiation here. Cut the zip tie, holding that on, get that fed through. I'll need two hands, so I'll have to set you down, but I'll feed that through and get my hook on, and that should officially do it. I tracked down the rest of my components, mainly the hook and the controller, plugged them all in. I just flipped the switch and I have a blue light right there, which means I should have power. And let's see if we take this out. I have a working winch. This is something I've always thought was really cool, that I have wanted most of my life on my rigs. This is the first time I've had a chance to do it, and I'm feeling pretty proud of myself. So another step for the off-roader or overlander, we have self-recovery potential. I got all excited thinking I was done with the winch install, and then a couple of things came to my attention that made me realize we're not quite there yet. Let me show you. I've got three things that I need to address. The easy one, I didn't want my winch just hanging out in the weather all the time, so I invested in a cover. But now that it is in, I've got a little problem with clearance. So I believe this cover is intended to go all the way around and even over like the front and the fairlead, which it can't do with the winch inside the bumper. Now that's not a big deal because this does go down far enough. I think I can get it down there and rest it against the rope, and that will be fine. The problem is in the back. I will not be able to get it over this wire loom right here, because that is right up against the grill. Even if I do what I mentioned before with another grill and cut one of the fins out, that's still going to be an issue. My wife has suggested that we modify the cover, which is what we will probably have to do, and cut a slit up one of these sides and then do some sort of tie on the bottom. That would make it kind of hard to tie it because I pretty much have to get underneath, so that's what I'm trying to solve. I mean, a zipper's not going to do it. That's all going to be problematic. So we'll keep working on that and see if there's a way we can work around that. Problem number 2. I don't like this setup in the front. I'm a bit disappointed that the hook that came with the winch does not really fit in the recovery hole. It fits in there enough, but I would ideally like it to swing, like rotate all the way through, so that if I was using a snatch block and attaching back to myself, that this hook wouldn't have all this pressure here. It could line up straight according to the pole. So I'm looking at this hook thinking this is not going to be the most usable. I do have hard shackles that came with the rear bumper that fit this front very well, but I don't want those hanging on all the time because I don't want them flapping, I don't want the rattle, and I don't want them dinging up my powder coat. So I'm against putting a hard shackle on and attaching this to it for that reason. I'm also concerned about this rubbing right there the way it is, because it is definitely rubbing even though it's not tight. I'm thinking at this point, because I utilize soft shackles, which I got with my recovery rope, that maybe I don't need this hook, or I definitely don't need it to stay on the rope all the time. I may put it in my recovery box. Then my problem becomes how to keep my rope from getting sucked in. For that solution, what I would really like to do is get one of the Yankum fair leads that has just the loop that slides onto the side. But those are not in my budget right now, so I'm going to have to wait on that. My next option is to get a rope stopper. I looked around last night and I found one I thought was way cool. I ordered it, and as I got out here today and looked at my setup, it's not going to work. It has a third prong, so it's got the 2 screws on the sides, and then it's got a third prong that goes in between the rope, which helps keep it open, and that's the idea I really liked. But this has a welded bracket in the middle right where that piece would go, so that's not going to work. Plus these, I think, are too thick. It's made to go around rope, but not this piece here. Unfortunately, it doesn't look like I can cancel that, so that's $30 down the drain. So then I went to my second alternative, which isn't bad. I kind of like it, and I was able to get it in the color I wanted, and that is a shackle mount. So it goes around the loop, and here's a picture of the one I just ordered. As you can see, it's intended to go around the loop. Hopefully it'll fit around this bracket, and it gives yet another loop for a soft shackle or whatever else, hard shackle, soft shackle, and it'll ride right up here on the front. It'll pull up tight to the fair lead and should work just fine. And also it's red, which corresponds with most of my upgrades. Just by default ended up being red, so I look for red whenever I can. My third and final problem is with my switch. The location. I totally thought I had the clearance with the hood, but I noticed the first time I closed it that it didn't close very well, and then I see like rub marks on here. And I believe because the hood contours down right here, that's right where the switch is. It's right in this spot. And it's close. It's missing the spring bracket right here. I do know that. But I think it is still pressing up against this spot. So to avoid breaking my switch and rubbing stuff, I need to make an amendment to that. I think this is pretty simple, just takes a little bit of time. I'm going to cut out on this bracket, this square, and use some scrap metal and drop this down about an inch or so. So it'll still be over the top of this plate, recessed enough the switch and the hood won't interfere with each other. The process is pretty straightforward. I got to do a little cutting and a little welding. So here's what I have to do. Remove my coolant reservoir. That's easy. This strap, and it'll just pop off. Disconnect the switch. There is an added bonus to this. I mentioned earlier that the wires into the back made it a really tight fit. If I recess this down, it'll resolve that problem as well. Then remove the plate, which is 2 or 3 10mm bolts. Quick and easy, the plate is removed, and I don't even need to use the whole switch. I can just use the base of it. Put right here to get my outline for where I need to cut. Then I need to make a bracket, and to do that I'm going to use part of this piece right here, which is a piece out of the original driver's side door, which I have since replaced because it was crinkled a little bit from an accident. I used that piece to make my cup holder, which I believe I posted in another video. You can watch that if you're interested. And I'm going to use it again. I took a moment to hit this with some water and a brass brush, try to get some of the scale off of it. Mostly that's just because I like cleaning things up before I put them back in, and I didn't realize how crusty this was getting. But also, should I decide to weld the new bracket in, I want some clean surfaces. So got my piece cut out and got my edges chamfered with a file. I have my cuts marked. Not sure you can see those very well, but they are there. I've reconfigured them a little bit. I was going to do flaps on all four sides, but ultimately I decided to abandon the two short flaps. So I'm only going to do these two long ones with a full bottom. I have my lines marked a little more clearly now that I've got my piece cut out. These be my bend lines. I'm lined up for the first one, set up in the vise. I'm going to start by cranking this over and then use the hammer to fine tune it. That went quite well. A pretty good bend. This is pretty much what I was going for. That'll work just fine. Drill the holes for the screws. Throw on some paint and we'll be pretty much there. I won't film all that stuff. That's pretty mundane and routine. So next time you come in, it'll be when I am putting it back in place. And let me tell you, that weld job was humbling. I don't know if it was going to my head or what, but I thought I had this welding thing mostly figured out. I had all my settings as instructed, but let's just say this is well ventilated on both sides. But it is in there definitely well enough to hold the switch. So it looks ugly. I'm not going to show it to you, but it'll work. I've noticed as I'm putting it in that this edge is right against my fender firewall. So I certainly could not have gone any further this way. It's really just kind of dumb luck that it does fit. Better welds might not push on it quite so much because I did goober them up a little bit. But I do have both bolts started, so this is in place. And as you can see, a nice little paint job to freshen it up. Voila! We are complete. So all in all, dropped it about an inch. I wanted 1.25 inches, but I gave myself room that 1/4 inch is not going to matter. It's solid. I've got good turn. I'm anchored on all four screws on this. And as you can see, jiggling this shakes the whole bracket. So those aerated welds that I did are certainly enough. So that solves 2 out of my 3 problems. The last one is the cover, which I don't think you'll be terribly interested in. Not worth holding the video up on that. We'll find a solution. With that, I think this is an appropriate place to close this one out. Thanks for tuning in for this one. If you wouldn't mind taking just a moment and click the like button. If you'd like to see more projects related to this Jeep or some of my other interests, click the subscribe button. It doesn't cost you a thing, could really help my channel. I'd appreciate it greatly. I'll see you on the next one.